Webster's Dictionary defines vampire as something that either exists or doesn't, and either will or won't.
That's about as accurate a description as I've ever heard. And it describes it to a T. And I don't think there's any, beating around a bush. What we're going to be talking about today is Los Vampire.
Bleh!
Bleh! No, and we started off with werewolves last week. And this week we're diving quite honestly right into one of the heart, not heart bloodstream? I don't know. But it's one of the most popular monsters at this time of year is vampires.
It's actually my favorite monster.
Really?
I think on the whole. Yeah, out of all the monsters that are kind of associated with Halloween, I think this one is gives me the most joy.
Well, at the very least, it's one of those elements that is very culturally relevant, and it has been since inception. Like it's always been, it's always been portrayed through the years as part of high society. It's always been, there's always been twists and turns and different takes on it, but it's always there. And to exemplify that fact, the movies we watched are both ancient and very relevant still today.
Yeah, I think we should probably start with Nosferatu first.
Yeah, Nosferatu. A classic film wrapped in controversy and legal issues when it was made back in 1922. It was an adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it wasn't authorized by the family.
Right.
So, F.W. Murnau and his German production house decided to make a movie that changed all the names and all the places that took place in the novel, and just try to skirt around copyright infringement.
And the Stokers still sued over that, and
they still won.
And they won.
And it's kind of funny because they won the court case back then in 1922, and over the course of time the film's become public domain. And
well, yeah, it's really weird because at the time of the ruling, the judge ordered all the copies of the movie destroyed. Now there was a handful of copies that were saved, and
they'd already been sent out like to other people or
right. But this movie came very close to not existing.
No, and it's one of those, I guess you want to call it a cult film because of the way it was released and the way it came into this world.
I think that's a very accurate thing to say. I was reading on a few message boards. This is not the first horror movie ever made.
No,
but it might be the first vampire movie ever made.
Well, in terms of one that it was kind of a strange thing at the time to put a movie of this kind of length for the horror genre. A lot of times it was more akin to small picture show kind of offerings, 5-10 minutes, and you can go see them at the carnivals. They have those rigs that you just put your eyes and look through the goggles, and you get to see a little film.
This was a legit film.
It was a legit film with very, very precise filmmaking instructions, and it's noticeable even today. It's immaculately filmed. It's well set up and well shot. The lighting is beautiful, and shooting on location always helps too.
Yeah, this movie actually, that's kind of how the company that made it couldn't afford to have a set and things like that. So if you want a shot, you're gonna have to go out into the wild and get it.
Oh yeah, there's still, it was at the time where there's still authenticity in the landscape that they chose, and so they filmed in Eastern Europe, and boy, does it just, that place just not change at all. It still looks like the castles. They're still very, very clean and well maintained. They're not the charming old ruins that ghost hunters go to on shows nowadays. It looked like a working castle where you could live.
Yeah.
And what lived there was one mean old man. Count Orlok, which is now Count Dracula, essentially, for all intents and purposes. I will shift in between saying both of those.
Right.
But I mean Dracula, the vampire. he's a mean old man, and he's got plans in motion to move to the big city, and he wants to migrate to the large city, and he's buying up property, and he's preparing to move, and so he enlists the aid of kind of a real estate broker, an agency, and they send out an agent to come and deal and see these dealings through, because this guy has a lot of money, and you know the company that's dealing with him isn't exactly on the level. They'll skim off a little off the top, and they don't want to miss any piece of this cash cow. So they send poor Jonathan Harker out to seal the deal, and he ends up encountering one of the weirdest old men you'll ever see put to film.
And one of the best, I think, best portrayals of a vampire in film, maybe ever.
It's probably visually my favorite.
Yeah, it doesn't. This movie is full of a lot of shadow play with you know, the silhouette of the creature kind of moving up the stairs, and
or the hand reaching through the door.
Yeah, and just to look at the thing, you know, this thing looks kind of crazy. You know, he's not.
There's shades of insanity.
You take a look at this thing, you know off the hop that, you know, this guy's not human, not anymore.
Well, especially like, you know, the scenes leading up to the reveal of Count Orlok or Dracula, is the townspeople are absolutely terrified of this fellow. They, so much that they're not even going to go up his road. You know, the long winding road up to his castle on the hill. It's a terrifying visual, and you kind of have to forgive an older movie. The fact that almost none of it was shot during the nighttime, because it was nearly impossible to do so.
Yeah, the technology didn't exist.
Yeah, you've got to forgive it for that. But even during the day, this place looks creepy. The guy is he's just a cut above. And I remember reading at the time that it was criticized for being too bright and too clean of a movie, and it wouldn't scare anybody.
I think it's fascinating.
I think maybe seeing so much and having such a well designed look to the movie helps it be appreciated, but I have to agree it's not that scary. It's got some good creeps.
No, but it's one of those. I read a comment on a message board saying that this is the one movie that if you're a casual horror fan, this is about as far back as people go.
Yeah,
and I think if you were to hold to that, you know, it's probably a good start to the genre as a whole. You know, I
don't think there's a horror fan that hasn't seen it or doesn't have a copy on their shelf. I know I have a copy, and I've seen it pretty much yearly for the past decade, or on Halloween or around Halloween, and it just speaks to the kind of the legacy of it.
And you know, it's kind of a weird aside. It's a movie we haven't got to yet. Is Shadow of the Vampire. That came out a few years ago. It starred Willem Dafoe as Count Orlok, and the whole.
Who's that other guy?
I know who exactly you're talking about. I just don't. John Malkovich.
Yeah, Malkovich. Jeez, easiest name to forget.
Yeah, and the whole setup for that movie was that the film Nosferatu was actually real.
Yeah.
And that they actually found this guy and decided to film him, you know, a real vampire.
Yeah, a guy that was as legit as they come. Like, he's the MC Hammer of the vampire world. No, but that's a work of fiction. Of course, we all know, you know, vampires don't exist. But there's something about the subject that I like, because they're so immortal and they're so old. I'd like to know how it all began. And that's where we move on to the other film that we're going to be talking
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
A foul bowl of men's vanity. Perhaps you should grow a beard.
Real turn of...
One of my personal favorites, actually.
What a twist! We switched from talking about Dracula in an old movie to a Dracula in a new movie.
And you know, this, I'm sure you've seen it, but if you haven't, if you've never read the book and you know you don't know what Dracula is. You know, it pretty much follows the story that my brother outlaid for the first movie, because this is the authorized version, and it follows the book pretty well. I've read the book several times throughout the years, and it deviates very little.
No, it deviates less than Nosferatu.
Yeah, well, Nosferatu had to.
It had to, but we'll get about that later. Continue on telling us about Keanu Reeves' tour de force.
Oh man, this. If I may inquire, what happened to Mr. Renfield? And I'm pretty sure that's my Keanu Reeves does English impression.
Yeah,
And I think I'm on par.
You know what? That's understudy material right there. No, it was the most confusing casting, except for maybe a couple parts.
Yeah. You know, there's a couple
Like
of
even Winona Ryder.
Well, this movie was out in '92.
Yeah,
you know,
1992.
and there was a few hit people that you had to put in. Gary Oldman playing the Count.
Yeah.
Winona Ryder. I forget what exactly she did, but I remember she was a big deal in the mid to early '90s.
Yeah, that was
The
kind of her
late
time.
90s. Keanu Reeves coming off Bill and Ted.
Yeah, Bill and Ted, that was 86 and 87?
Mm-hmm.
Or 86 and 88 or something like that. So yeah, you had a lot of these young people trying to have their legit movie moment.
Well, and also, there's another guy in there that showed his face last week. Anthony Hopkins returns in this movie.
Looking exactly the same in 92 as he did in 2010.
I'm starting to think that, geez, if Anthony Hopkins is in a horror movie, it's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, it's kind of a telling thing that if he signs his name to it, it's worth a little bit of salt.
He makes it pretty fun. Oh, and also Carrie Elwes is in this one. You know, Wesley the farm boy.
Yeah, from Princess Bride, or I forget Doctor Whoever from the Saw movies.
Yeah. And you know the weird thing about that is Carrie Elwes is also in Shadow of the Vampire. It's like the same people just get cycled in and out.
Yeah, cyclical. I would have been surprised to see. Wouldn't have been surprised to see Anthony Hopkins in Shadow of the Vampire. Mm-hmm. That would have made just too much sense. No, and it was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, which you were saying was a requirement of the Stoker estate.
Wow, I don't know. I might have made that up, but
it sounds kind of legit. Like if you're gonna take our movie or take our family's ideas and our intellectual property, give it to somebody with that can do it.
They have the chops. Yeah,
we need the chops. I don't know why the Stokers are kind of Italian.
I don't know why you said it like that.
It's the sugar.
It's the sugar. But you know, the movie is just it's as much a visual pleasure to look at as the Nosferatu. You know, when Nosferatu had a ton of fun with shadows and makeup, and being on scene, this Bram Stoker's Dracula had a lot of fun with the costumes.
The costumes, and what I like is the visual style of using a lot of sets. Mm-hmm. At times it can look a little hokey, but when it looks beautiful, it looks gorgeous.
Well,
you can tell there was more of an art style to this movie than.
It's as hokey as Flash Gordon. I really liked Flash Gordon.
Oh, I did too.
Yeah.
If you're gonna watch a movie, let's watch something cool on screen. Mm-hmm. If you had a straight retelling of a dank old castle and scenes in the pitch black, I'm not sure I would love this movie as much as I did.
No, maybe you're right.
Yeah, you can play things too realistic.
I think so. I'm struggling to think of a vampire movie that.
I think Shadow of the Vampire is a damn bland thing to look at.
What about Let the Right One In or Let Me In? You know, there's two versions of that same movie.
I saw the Swedish one.
I saw both of them actually, but
I still have to see the new one or the American version.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the way both movies looks, it's definitely they're both inspired, and I think that's the most important thing to relate.
I just remembered something. Like this movie came out in '92, which would have made me about 12 years old.
Yeah.
At the time, and this was kind of uncomfortable to watch because it for a 12-year-old me, it had one of the sexiest scenes I'd ever seen in a movie. And so there's Mom and Dad watching alongside with me. And, you know, it's when poor Keanu gets seduced by 3 vampire women. One of whom is Monica Bellucci.
I wouldn't say he gets seduced.
Well,
he just gets ravished.
He gets ravished.
Ravished and nibbled on.
That's not a bad way to spend a month in Dracula's castle, I guess.
Yeah, I like how he seemed to complain about it in a letter that one time. Oh, they do what they do to keep me weak.
I was impotent with fear.
Bullshit, Jonathan. You were gonna shack up there for the whole summer. You know it. But when you look at the way these 2 films kind of came out and they explored their subject matter, and you made a very valid point that Nosferatu had to deviate a certain amount, tried to avoid the legal battles.
Mm-hmm. And even then it didn't do it enough.
But in doing so, it actually provided quite a few of the archetypes of a vampire that we appreciate today.
I think you're getting at like the whole White Wolf Games thing.
No.
What
it is. We'll get to that as well. What we hate about vampires, but this is the first movie that vampires died from sunlight. Nosferatu, I mean. In Bram Stoker's Dracula, and even in the book, sunlight only weakens vampires. Like the Gary Oldman's line of, "Oh, it is not their natural habitat, but they can live in the light." That's the worst accent ever, but yeah, like there's scenes where Gary Oldman as Dracula's walking around the streets in broad daylight.
Yeah. Okay.
And, you know, Nosferatu invented the sunlight thing.
Okay.
So,
all right.
You know, it wasn't authentic, but boy, was it influential.
Yeah, but you know, vampires are so crazy. You know, we kind of had like touched on this in the last video about werewolves, that these things they got so many ticks.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember, and I don't know if this is valid because I read it in a book when I was a kid, that vampires, one of the ways that you could actually kill them, and I think that sunlight was a weakness, because the idea was you put out a bunch of mustard seeds or something small, because vampires are compelled to count things.
Yeah, there's compulsion.
And that's why this, you know, you have Sesame Street, you know, the Count likes to count.
Yeah.
You know, so the idea was he'd be counting all night until the sun came up and poof, he's gone.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, for film, it was the first movie that did that. I mean, that's the iconic end scene of Nosferatu. Spoiler, the vampire dies.
You know, the weird thing? I never actually saw the Lugosi version of this movie.
Neither have I. Of course, I was never a Lugosi fan, really. I mean, not like I hate the guy, but I've just never seen many of his movies.
Mm-hmm.
No, my experience with the vampires were the horrible White Wolf era.
Yeah.
Bram Stoker's Dracula, Nosferatu, and that's pretty much it. Like that era, like I grew up when it was still kind of cool to be into the long trench coats and the long hair and
oh boy,
RPG games and carrying swords around and drinking wine.
That's we're moving into Blade territory.
Yeah, Blade territory.
One, you know, where what's tougher than a vampire in a trench coat with a katana? Well, probably nothing.
Yeah.
I never got into that.
I got into that huge.
You got into that?
Well, more than most people I know.
Okay.
That I associated with. I was always kind of seen as the weird kid with the trench coat.
At least you didn't have a katana. You didn't have one, right?
So yeah, that's kind of the.
So you did.
That's kind of the age I grew up in. So watching these movies in retrospect, like going back to watch them, I had much more respect for these films.
Well, these films do it right, I think.
Yeah, they're way better than any of the modern vampire movies. Like even Interview with a Vampire, TV shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and any of the modern media. Sure, it's good for a chuckle, but these are classics. You'll always come back to these. So That's my purview. Is, you know, everyone complains about the pussification. Weird way of pronouncing that. Pussification of the vampires over time, and I have to agree. The older the vampire, the more badass.
Yeah, I kind of like how the Nosferatu's this gnarled thing that.
Yeah, he's a monster.
He's a monster, and you know, Gary Oldman's portrayal of the vampire is, you know, equally as decrepit. You know, I'm not a huge fan of the aristocratic Anne Rice.
The sexy young vampires.
Yeah, I'm not too big a fan on that. You know, it translates into a lot of other movies that I'm not quite keen on, like in Underworld. You know, it's like, oh, these vampires, you know, they're these pitiable creatures that have to live in wealth and youth for eternity.
Yeah.
And they're so powerful, they got the werewolves on the run at every turn.
Yeah, and they're always so angry about who's not killing more werewolves.
Yeah, you know, I just don't get the big deal.
No, I don't either. I as a kid, I liked the look. Visually, I just like the look. Older you get, realize you kind of get more refined tastes. So for me, I own a lot of vampire movies, but these are the two that I watch most.
Right.
And I encourage you to do the very same.
Don't you look at us when we're talking to you. I just wanted to say that.
Nice. Well, I think that's pretty much it for vampires. I mean, they're so everywhere that there's not really much we can talk about. Other than just say, don't watch any of the Blade movies. I think that's the only thing I'll say.
Be there. Take care. Be there.